Hello friends, we'll continue with the seventh chapter of economic survey, that is climate change and environment. We already discussed about some of the initiative like green hydrogen mission and also related to mangroves, and also some of the decisions that are updated at the international level, UNFCCC. Now we'll continue the discussion. So in this is related to status of sovereign green bond issuance in 2021. So to turn it into green, you need lot of resources. The resources are a challenging task for both developed and as well as developing world. The developing world is depending on developed world because they have that moral responsibility, but apart from that you need to find some avenues to finance the green projects in their respective countries. If you looking into this green bond, it is a sovereign green bond. Sovereign is issuing the green bond. The money that we collected through that bond will be utilized for funding the green projects, and various countries have started issuing it. Here in this graph they have given related to UK, France, Italy, Germany, China, Spain, Serbia, Korea, Hungary, Colombia. There is no country called India here. Why? Because Union Budget 2022-23 announced the issue of sovereign gold bonds. The issuance of sovereign green bond will help the government to tap the requisite finance from potential investors for deployment in public sector projects aimed at reducing the carbon intensity in the economy. So that process itself we have announced it in the 2022-23 budget, but this data is related to 2021. So based on the decision announced it in the year 2022-23 budget, the Reserve Bank of India has started issuing the sovereign green bonds. But before I explain this, one thing you must have an idea, that is related to the role of financial entities in curbing, or how financial institution must adapt themselves during the climate change crisis. Normally when we are discussing about climate change, we will discuss about the role of government, the role of NGOs, or the role of particular governing institutions, role of industry, how development should taken up. So these are all the various stakeholders. But another important stakeholder is the financial institutions in the country. It can be various financial institutions. So we must understand their role, and we must understand how they must adapt or how they must reorient. And in this economic survey has given the role of both Reserve Bank of India and SEBI. So these two institutions must also play an important role in the eve of climate change. Now first one, the Reserve Bank of India has notified the indicative calendar for the issuance of sovereign green bonds for the fiscal year 2022-23. So the decision has already announced it in the budget. So accordingly, Reserve Bank of India has issued a calendar, an indicative calendar, according to which the issuance would take place through two auctions. One is on January 25th, 2023, and second one is February 9, 2023. That is already completed, respectively for 8,000 crore each, totaling 16,000 crore. So these are the sovereign bonds for which government is the guarantor. So that is why Reserve Bank of India has issued. The potential investors will invest the money. That money will be utilized by the government. The Reserve Bank of India, laid out exploring how climate scenario exercises can be used to identify vulnerabilities in RBI supervised entities' balance sheet, business models, and gaps in their capabilities for measuring and managing climate related financial risk. Now, because of climate change, you are experiencing the lot of climate variabilities. Either it can be cold waves, either it can be heat waves, either it can be flooding, either it can be droughts, anything. So when these type of incidents, when these type of phenomenon took place, it has its own impact on the society. Suppose if there is a drought, there is no agriculture production. If there is a flood, there is an agriculture production. If there is a severe heat wave, it has its own impact on agriculture productivity, animal husbandry, dairy sector. I am giving the example. Suppose if these sector got affected, then certainly the banks has disbursed certain amount of loans to these sectors. Now, if there is a loss in this sector, definitely that will impact the balance sheet of the bank. So that means the severe impact of climate change will have its own influence on various sectors of economy. Definitely it affects the financial conditions of the banks and other non-banking institutions. So you must identify the vulnerabilities, to what extent you can affect, how we can mitigate that impact, how we can still make our balance sheet so stronger. That is what Reserve Bank of India is doing. That means Reserve Bank of India is identify the modalities and in what way we can identify such vulnerabilities, because identification of such vulnerabilities is very, very important to make the financial system strong in this country. So that is where Reserve Bank of India is having the role. Next. Also in 2007, Reserve Bank of India advised the banks to put in place an appropriate action plan for making over time. RBI has incentivized the banks lending towards the green industries and a meaningful contribution to sustainable development projects. For example, renewable energy projects have been included under priority sector lending. And apart from this identification of vulnerabilities, Reserve Bank of India is also instructing the banks to fund for green projects. On the one hand, it itself is issuing the bonds. On the other hand, it is identifying the vulnerabilities so that it is making the financial system so strong. It is instructing the banks to do so, and also it is incentivizing the banks. If you finance for the green projects, I will incentivize. So this is how Reserve Bank of India is playing an important role. The RBI has also been spreading the awareness on the issue of green and sustainable finance by discussing the opportunities and challenges of green finance through its publications and their communication. So it is creating an awareness not to the general public, awareness to the financial institutions, like if you fund for green projects, what are the advantages or what are the opportunities and what are the challenges, and it is creating an awareness on the whole green development. So this is the role of Reserve Bank of India. Apart from all other stakeholders in an economy or in a country, Reserve Bank of India can certainly contribute in this way. That means it is for the promotion of the green development, and it itself is reorienting its whole financial system to adjust to the impact of climate change. Next, when it comes to the SEBI, Securities and Exchange Board of India. SEBI is a secondary market and primary market regulator. SEBI introduced the regulatory framework for issuance of green debt securities. So it is for the issuance of green debt securities. That means we are all aware about the securities. We are all aware about equity securities and debt securities. Now this is a green debt securities. That means the one who want to invest in green projects, they can issue the debt securities, that we call it as green debt securities, and SEBI is considering it as a special case in issuing the green debt securities. Now SEBI introduced a specific regulatory framework because you need to promote them. You need to promote them, and there is a future opportunity. We have to regulate it properly, otherwise it may create some problem and it may lead to instability. So as a regulator, it is creating a separate regulatory framework for the issuance of green debt securities as a mode of sustainable finance under the erstwhile SEBI regulations 2008 through a circulation in 2017. Now, based on the review, it has decided in a recent meeting of 2022. So what they decided when it comes to the this green debt securities? Green debt securities, the regulatory framework, though we already have it, but recently some changes we made. What are the changes? We are enhanced, that means SEBI has enhanced the scope of definition of green debt security. So what is this green debt security? That definition we have widened. We have widened to include new modes of sustainable finance in relation to pollution prevention control and eco-efficient products, etc. That means for the purpose of issuing of green debt securities, we have widened the definition. That means now the people who are raising the funds for even prevention and for even pollution prevention and control, for even eco-efficient products, they can also raise the debt. That is how we have widened the definition for the purpose of green debt securities. It is done by the SEBI. Because normally when you are issuing these securities, you have to take the approval of the SEBI. Then SEBI will looking into your total project details and then they will give the assent for issuing these things. Next one, introduce the concept of blue bonds. Yeah, we have introduced the concept of blue bonds. What is this blue bond? It is related to water management and marine sector. So the one who want to invest in that area, they can issue the blue bond. And yellow bonds, it is related to the solar energy. Yellow bonds related to the solar energy. And transition bonds, that means who are transferring from one to another. Okay, that means renewable, or let it be high pollution to the less pollution. Okay, so that is transition bonds as a subcategories of green debt securities. So these two changes important. Okay, one is enhancing the scope of the definition of green debt security. Second one is blue, yellow and transition bonds. So this is about the role of financial institution, especially RBI and SEBI. Major decisions at COP 27. Major decisions at COP 27. So apart from updating the nationally determined contributions, there are other decisions taken at the COP 27. We are all aware this summit or this meeting took place in the year 2022 from 6th to 20th November in Egypt. And along with the COP 27, there is another session that was also held, that is parties to the Kyoto Protocol. Okay, 17th session of the Conference of Parties of the Parties to the Kyoto Protocol. Next one important, yes, India participated in COP 27 with a focus on mainstreaming the theme of lifestyle for environment. So our Prime Minister has started this life. So life is lifestyle for environment. That means our lifestyle should change according to the environment. Our production, our consumption and all our lifestyle pattern should be adjusted to the changing environment. That is what lifestyle for environment. This concept is important. When you are writing any environment and ecology answer appropriately, you must quote this life. Okay, you must quote this life. So it is related to the sustainable patterns of consumption and production for the efforts to address the climate change. The other decision was setting up the just transition and mitigation work program and the agreement on joint work on the implementation of the climate action on agriculture and food security. Yes, because agriculture in its own way contributing to the climate change, and because of climate change agriculture is getting impacted. So on that we need to study. So for that there is a committee, they are going to study on this, okay, agriculture and food security, a specific program. Next, another decision, it was decided to establish new funding arrangements for assisting developing countries that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effect of climate change in response to the loss and damage. So there was a discussion about loss and damage fund, though that fund has not created, but a transitional committee has been established to work out the modalities, because we don't know exactly who is going to contribute to that loss and damage fund, to what extent they are going to contribute, and to whom we need to give this fund. So there are no modalities, because developing countries and least developed countries, they are insisting on the funding pattern. That is why they have agreed to set up a transitional committee. We don't know when it will really come into existence. So these are some of the major decisions taken at COP 27, agriculture and food security, loss and damage fund, and lifestyle for environment. The other substantive elements covered in the COP 27. So those two are the major things. What are the other? Importance of science in guiding the climate action. Anyway, so we have to be scientific enough. Only those scientific principles should guide us in tackling the climate change, because some people in the world, that means some countries in the world, sometimes they will talk about there is no climate change. Humans are not at all responsible for climate change. It is a God, he can only change the climate. This is how they will, okay. So that is why whatever the climate action that we are taking, that must be guided by the science. Doubling the adaptation finance. This adaptation finance is very, very important for the developing world, because there are two aspects. One is mitigation and second one is adaptation. So mitigation means you have to mitigate it, but okay, you will mitigate it. How you will mitigate it? Because you need to go for other alternatives, you need to have a good technology. What about adaptation? While you are mitigating, at the same time you need to adapt yourself to the changing climate. So let it be the coastal areas, let it be urban areas. Then how you will do it? You will do it by changing your structures, by changing your processes, by changing your mode of production. This is how you need to adapt. For that you need money, and who has to give that money? Again, this is a question mark, but definitely there should be a money for this adoption, and we need to double that adoption, the money that is for the adoption. And for the developing countries, this adapting finances is very, very important. Dialogue on making finance flows consistent with low emissions. So dialogue on making finance flow consistent with low emissions. Climate resilient development calls on multilateral development banks reform for delivering climate finance at a scale. Okay, so multilateral development banks, okay, they must also provide, so their role in finance. Diversity of sources of finance, including new and additional finances. So if you looking into the other substantive elements, apart from this science guiding the climate action, remaining all are talking about the finances. That itself shows that the importance of finance in curbing the climate change. So, this is a very important aspect, because without finance you can't adapt to the climate, and you can't uh, uh, adapt yourself to the climate change, and you can't mitigate that impact. That is why Nobel laureate said, first you grow, then you think about climate change, otherwise no one will help you. India's initiatives at the international stage. So, apart from participating in the international level summits or discussions, India itself has taken some initiatives at the international level to promote the concept of the reducing climate change or mitigating the impact of climate change. So, first one is International Solar Alliance. So, through International Solar Alliance, it has created an international alliance for promoting the solar energy. Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. So, during this during this climate change, definitely there is a impact on the infrastructure that you have created. Either it can be in urban areas, either it can be roads, either it can be ports, either it can be your digital infrastructure, or it can be any other infrastructure that you have created. Definitely it will impact. So, you have to create a disaster resilient infrastructure. For that, you must have a coalition to share knowledge, technology, finances, expertise and all. So, for that we have created a coalition for disaster resilient infrastructure. This is an India's initiative. Leadership Group for Industry Transition, Lead IT. Leadership Group for Industry Transition, Lead IT. So, they have given some information related to Lead IT. So, this is for industry transition. So, when the industry is transiting from one, that means from high pollution to the low pollution level, then how we must cooperate and how we must share our expertise. So, this group is for that. So, it promotes the value chain partnership and material circularity, invest and cooperate on the planning and implementation of the infrastructure to support energy and industry transition, and it formulates the roadmap for heavy industry sector that include regulatory framework and incentives and long-term strategies, and it also give multilateral development banks and multilateral climate funds mandated to de-risk investments in the transition of heavy industries. So, whenever they are transiting from this high pollution to the low pollution, definitely there is a risk, and that risk must be de-risked by using some of the institutions. And here they have given, this is important, India and Nepal signed a memorandum of understanding in August 2022 on biodiversity conservation to strengthen and enhance the coordination and cooperation in the fields of wildlife, environment, biodiversity conservation, climate change. It includes the restoration of the corridors and interlinking of areas and sharing knowledge and best practices between the two nations. Okay. So, India's initiatives are Indian program at the international level to combat the climate change. Okay, you can write Solar Alliance, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, Lead IT Group, and also signing memorandum with various countries. Yeah. Key outcomes of COP 15. So, the earlier COP is different, this COP is different. Earlier COP 27 was to the Convention of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, but this COP 15 is to the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, UNCBD. Okay, this was held at Montreal. So, there was an, they have released an outcome document that you call it as Kunming Montreal document. Okay. So, anyhow, the major focus of this COP or this convention is to restore the biological diversity. So, the major outcomes, I already made a video on these outcomes of COP15. It is available in Amrita YouTube channel. You can watch it. Effective conservation and management of at least 30% of the world's land, inland water, coastal area and oceans. Currently 17% and 10% of the world's terrestrial and marine area under protection. See, normally in our country we are having some protected areas. So we will call with different names like biosphere reserves or wildlife sanctuaries, national parks. This is how we will name it. Likewise, across the world with different names, they are protecting some area, both terrestrial and marine. So what is the existing area? 17% of the terrestrial and 10% of the marine area is under protection. But to protect the biodiversity or to restore the biological diversity, the outcome, the COP is resolved to enhance it to the 30% for both terrestrial as well as the marine ecosystem. So we need to enhance it to 30%, then only you can protect the biological diversity. That is the first one. Next, second one, reduce to near zero the loss of areas of high biodiversity importance. So in highly biological diversity, the area with high biological diversity, the loss can happen in many ways. So poaching is one, habitat loss is another, invasion of invasive species or alien species is another. So what we need to do is the loss in high biodiversity important areas, we must confine it to the zero. Forget about promoting, enhancing the biodiversity, but at least we need to make that loss to the zero. That is one. Cut the global food waste in half and significantly reduce overconsumption and waste generation. So reduce the overconsumption and waste generation and cut the global food waste. Next, reduce of both excess nutrients and overall risk posed by the pesticides and highly hazardous chemicals. Yes, this is also important because these pesticides and hazardous chemicals are one of the reasons for the threatening, one of the reasons why biological diversity is threatening, especially in the agricultural fields, because when you go for pesticides, it kills all the other weeds and different type of pests. And when it comes to the fertilizers they don't kill directly, but it has its own secondary impacts, okay, like eutrophication and all. Next, again funding, these 3 points related to the funding. So progressively phasing out the reforming subsidies that harm the biodiversity by 2030, at least $500 billion per year. So funding, okay, these 3 points are related to the funding. They said like developed countries should contribute to some extent and developing and other countries, both public and private. So this is about funding. So funding, cutting down the subsidies are normally they mention it as subsidies. So cutting down the subsidies on excess nutrients and pesticides and reduce the food waste and also reduce the overconsumption and waste generation, reduce to near zero the loss of areas of higher biodiversity important areas, and also the protection, the protection area under protection must be enhanced to 30%. Those are the outcomes of COP15. Yeah. Project Cheetah, you are all aware, we have introduced the cheetah into the India because it was declared as an extinct from India in 1952. Recently, we brought 8 cheetahs from Namibia and 12 from South Africa. They introduced in the Kuno National Park in the state of Madhya Pradesh, because cheetah can introduction of a key species in an ecosystem will help us to restore the ecosystem health. Now here if you see, cheetah can help restore the open forest and grassland ecosystem in India. This will help conserve the biodiversity and enhance the ecosystem services like water security, carbon sequestration, soil moisture conservation and benefiting the society. Because if cheetah is introduced, then no one will enter into that area. So then definitely the services provided the ecosystem will get restored. Only that prey will affect, but otherwise no one will get affected, no one will enter into that area, so that can be protected. Okay, So this is about Project Cheetah, just go through it. Success story of tiger conservation efforts reflected in increased tiger count. You can see the increased tiger count, close to 3000. You can see the number of lions, okay, increased consistently, okay, just remember the trajectory, okay. Now, as of 10th August 2022, India is home to 53 tiger reserves covering 75,796 square kilometer area in 18 states, okay, 53 tiger reserves in 18 states. The current population estimates indicate about 50,000 to 60,000 Asian elephants worldwide. More than 60% of the population is in India. Okay, so worldwide 50,000 to 60,000. In that, 60% of the population is in India. Indian elephant has also been listed in Appendix 1 of the Convention of the Migratory Species in the Conference of Parties of CMS 13 at Gandhinagar, Gujarat in February 2020. So it was included in Appendix 1 of Convention on Migratory Species, because in the border areas it will move from one country to another country, and sometimes it migrate based on the climatic condition or based on the seasons. Okay, so if it is in India, no problem, but if it enter into the other country, definitely that country must protect the habitat for that migratory species. So that is why it is included. Yeah, Wildlife Protection Act 1972 has been amended multiple times to strengthen the conservation measures and fulfill the multilateral commitment on wildlife preservation. So recently again we introduced the Wildlife Act and we have passed Wildlife Protection Amendment Act of 2022. So in that, what they did is they have included many other animals and plants into the schedules of the Wildlife Protection Act, so that they started protecting more animals and more plants. So the act seeks to increase the number of species protected under the law and the implementation of this Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna. Earlier we used to see there are various lists in the Wildlife Protection Act, so we call it a schedule. So based on this schedule we will protect them. So which we feel like it is a threatening species and whose vulnerability is very high, we will protect them. But recently we have amended the act to include many more species. Why? Because we have signatory to the CITES agreement. Under this agreement, here I have mentioned, CITES is an international agreement between government to ensure international trade in specimen of wild animal or plant does not threaten to the survival of the species. So some of the species, they will be traded, and the trade will lead to the extinction or vulnerability to that species. So those species are facing the vulnerability because of the international trade will also be included in Wildlife Protection Act, so that those species will also be protected in this country. Okay, so earlier Wildlife Protection Act has having 6 schedules. So one schedule is for plants, one schedule is for vermins, that means we can kill according to their threat level, and 4 schedules for animals, total 4 plus 1 plus 1 6. But now what we did is reducing the number of schedules for specially protected animals to 2. So instead of 4, now we are having only 2 schedules for animals. Removing the schedule for vermin species. So vermins has removed. Inserting a new schedule for specimens listed in the appendices under CITES. So those plants or animals related to the CITES protection, that we are created a separate schedule and we have added in it. So one extra thing. So that means 2 plus 1 and 1 is plants. So now we are having the 4 schedules, important. Lastly, the act empowers the government to regulate or prohibit the import, trade, possession or proliferation of invasive alien species. Very, very important, because we have to regulate and prohibit the import, trade, possession or proliferation of invasive alien species, because they are having the high potential and tendency to destroy the biodiversity. Okay, anyhow, that is good. This is about Wildlife Protection Act. Yeah. Now, plastic waste management and elimination of identified single-use plastic. So, yes, Government of India has released some rules and regulations to eliminate the single-use plastic. So, if you see, according to a report, the average consumption of plastic at the global level per person per capita is 28 kg, whereas in India the per capita is only 11 kg, because Indian population is very high. Obviously, the per capita number comes down. Now, according to the plastic waste management rules of 2021, on August 12, 2021, they have released a guideline. According to that rule, from July 1, 2022, a ban was imposed on the manufacture, import, stocking, distribution, sale and use of identified single-use plastic items which have low utility and high littering potential, you can't use it multiple times. Moreover, it is having high littering potential. That is why there was a ban imposed on single-use plastic. It is both on sale, manufacturing, importing, stocking, distribution. Okay, and the measures will promote the circular economy, reduce the plastic footprint of plastic packaging, promote the development of new alternatives to the plastic packaging. Okay, important. Next, and apart from that, there are other rules that are released related to the plastic waste management. So, plastic waste management amendment rules 2022, on 16th February 2022, they announced the key highlights of the guideline is related to extended producer responsibility on plastic packaging. So, those who are releasing the plastic into the market, it is their responsibility to recycle it. Okay, that we call it as extended producer responsibility. So, further they have issued some guidelines. So, the mandatory registration of the producers, importers, brand owners and plastic waste processors through a centralized online portal. First of all, you have to register with the government, and coverage of 4 categories of plastic package like rigid, flexible, multi-layered plastic packaging and compostable plastic packaging. So, 4 different categories of plastic will be covered under this. Clearly define the targets for EPR. So, it is something like a target. See, you are a plastic producer and you are a particular brand owner and you are releasing some plastic cover bags. Now, you have to register with the government, and the government will clearly define the targets for you for this year, like how much amount of plastic that you must recycle. Next, mandatory targets for reuse of rigid plastic packaging, minimum level of recycling of plastic waste and use of recycled plastic content in plastic packaging. So, again there is a target clearly that, so how much amount you need to reuse, how much amount you need to recycle and how much you need to use of recycled plastic into the packaging again. Okay, clearly specified targets, and centralized online portal to support implementation of extended producer responsibility, provision for the sale and purchase of surplus EPR certificate. So, these EPR certificates are important, because suppose I have given a target of 1 ton of plastic, but because I have the technology, I did it 1.5 tons. So, extra for 0.5 tons, I will get an extra EPR certificate. Now, this certificate I can sell it to another person who has not meet their targets. Likewise, I can earn some money also, because I will sell it to that person. Levy of environmental compensation cess for non-fulfillment of EPR obligation, you can understand. Provision for verification, audit and monitoring of obligated entities. So, verification, audit and monitoring. Okay, this is something related to the plastic waste management rules. Next, battery waste management. Yeah, see, government published the battery waste management rules 2022 on August 24. 2022 to ensure environmentally sound management of waste batteries. Notifying these rules is transformative steps towards promoting the circular economy, because especially in this battery you are having some toxic metals. That is why we need to handle it properly, and it includes electric vehicle batteries, portable batteries, automotive batteries and industrial batteries. Now again, the rules function based on the concept of extended producer responsibility. So it is a producer responsibility to do it, where producers, that include importers of batteries, are responsible for collection and recycling or refurbishing of waste batteries and the use of recovered material from the waste into new batteries. EPR mandates that all the waste batteries to be collected and sent for recycling and refurbishing, prohibiting disposal in landfills and incineration. So they are prohibiting the landfills and incineration. You are not supposed to bury, or you are not supposed to burn it. Okay, so that is landfill and incineration. To meet the EPR obligation, producer may engage themselves or authorize any other entity to collect, recycle or refurbish. It is not compulsory that only producer has to do, but producer can engage themselves or they can authorize any other person, but only thing is they have to meet the targets. This is related to battery waste management rules. Next, e-waste management rules. Again, the government notified e-waste management rules in 2022 on November 2, 2022. These rules replace the earlier rules of 2016. Okay, these rules will launch a new extended producer responsibility. So this extended producer responsibility is important in protecting the environment and controlling the pollution, and you must mention this EPR whenever you are writing any answer. And the regime for e-waste recycling, the salient features of the rules. Okay, yeah, applicable to every manufacturer, producer, refurbisher, dismantler and recycler who must register with the CPCB. They must register. No entity shall carry out any business without registration, and not to deal with any unregistered entity. You are not supposed to deal with any unregistered entity, and you should not work without registration. The authorization has now been replaced by the registration through an online portal. Okay, now we can do it through online portal, and only manufacturer, producer, refurbisher and recyclers are required registration. Remaining else are not required any registration. The Schedule 1 has been expanded. Now 106 electrical and electronic equipment have been included under EPR regime. That means that schedule was widened. Earlier it was low. So producers notified EE have been given annual e-waste recycling target. So they will be given targets. So based on the generation from the previously sold EEE, or based on the sales of EEE, or the case may be. So based on your production or sales of electrical and electronic equipment, or generation from the previously sold EEE, you will be given the targets. And management of solar PV modules, panels, cells are also added in the new rules. The recycled quantity will be computed based on the end products to avoid the false claims. So once you have recycled, after recycling, what you are doing, you have to use it in end product. So based on that end product only, your recycled quantity will be calculated. Otherwise it lead to double calculation, because you say like I recycled, you have to show where you have used it and where is that end product. Okay, and provision for generation and transaction of EPR certificate, just now I explained, introduced. Provision for environmental compensation and verification and audit have been introduced. So verification, audit, and if you are not following the rules, there will be a compensation. You have to pay compensation. And apart from these things, it also provides for the recognition and registration of the skill development, because skill development is very, very important. Because today, if you looking into this disposal of this electronic waste, mostly happening in unorganized way, in an informal way. Okay, they are not doing it scientifically. So definitely you need to improve the skill set, and you must recognize, you must register the skill development, and you must monitor, and you must ensure the safety and health of the workers involved in dismantling of the e-waste. So it talks about the skill development, it talks about monitoring, it talks about the safety and health of the workers. So this is something related to the waste management rules. It includes e-waste management, it includes battery waste management, it includes plastic management rules and elimination of the single use plastic. So this is something related to environment and climate change and various decisions taken at the international level and at the government of India level. Okay, thank you.
Amrita IAS Academy.